Bertrand and Tohar have been out for over a week now, and sadly there is some really bad bugs that are making them even less viable than some of the issues with their kits already. So today I'm gonna go over exactly what it is that is not working on them, what should be working on them, and also what could be done to make them both incredibly better with very little effort, and the hopes that the developers might be implementing it in the future or not. Hey everyone, Zoraz here from Not Casuals. So first, Bertrand, obviously he is a pretty strong hero, but the biggest concerns that people have with him comes from the fact that compound interest, his second skill, gives him stacks of golden marks, up to 3 stacks, which increases his damage at 30% when you have this skill max. I currently have him at 5%, but obviously it can go to 10%, and it will get there soon as I will eventually max him. Now, many people have issues with this skill because this is not applying properly in the game currently, as it does say when Bertrand deals hero skill damage. Now, first of all, this is wrong in the first place. The translation is wrong. It is meant to say when Bertrand's Legion deals skill damage or hero skill damage. So that is one aspect that is currently bugged. So it does work if your secondary deputy, for example, does skill damage. So if you have Bertrand as the primary and Lilia as secondary or Velen as secondary, their damage will apply the stack of golden mark to the entire march. So this is one thing that is working properly but is badly translated. The thing that isn't working properly is that any other source of hero skill damage is not counted here. Now, this includes all winds and snare, for example, or Lilia's Scorch, which is going to be, applying itself often with Lilia, and Scorch is literally in the exact same window as the Flame of Vengeance rage skill, so Lilia's rage skill. You can see here it says deals diffuse damage, which is skill damage, to the target and 2 nearby legions, and then has a chance to inflict Scorch, which will deal damage every second for 5 seconds. This damage type is magic. It is a skill. So in theory, this should work. It doesn't. Now, the devs have said that this is intended. It shouldn't be working, which is a shame and makes no sense in the translation aspect. Obviously, the language here is wrong if that is the case. But in any case, apparently that's how it's meant to be. Now, same goes with Velen. His rage skill also does damage. This also works. I have dozens of reports that shows that these do trigger the actual compound interest from Bertrand. So this is not a question. It does work. Now, the awakening skill, which is also magic, also a skill, so also magic skill damage. This also doesn't work to apply the skill that Bertrand has that gives a buff, so the compound interest. So now we're having a lot of instances of damage that are not counted, which is really a shame. The devs do say that this is normal, so of course we don't really have a choice. Now, the one thing that is not normal is when you come on Bertrand and you look at his skill tree, Thirst for Blood, which is the last talent that you can get in the skill tree, does basically 60 hero skill damage to the target legion when casting your rage skill. So hero skill damage factor of 60. What does it say here? When Bertrand deals hero skill damage. Now let's have a look at a combat log to see exactly what that looks like. So here I have a Bertrand Lilia march that I went against a Darkling just to show you exactly how it works. So here is going to be where it gets interesting. When we come here and see Bertrand does his Entitled Rage, 9,700 damage. Thirst for Blood was triggered. This is normal. This is how it should be. And this does 450 damage. Now at the end, he gets Compound Interest, which is a buff that is 5% magic skill damage. If you look here, hero skill damage dealt 5%. So this activated at the end of the turn, and then Compound Interest, it shows you right here, Compound Interest was triggered and the skill damage was increased. Now, if you look at this, this is 2 instances of skill damage. You can see that, it loses unit, loses unit. This is skill damage. This is skill damage. It says even here, hero skill damage. So in all theory, this should be giving 2 stacks of the buff, but it only gives 1. Now, this is something that is hard to prove because you say which one of these 2 is actually giving you the buff. Now, if you have reports with Bertrand that doesn't have this talent, it still does the same thing. I've done it many times before I got the talent. It does not proc the Thirst for Blood that does the damage, the 60 damage, but it does still give the compound interest. The compound interest is basically being given to you for the Entitled Rage skill cast, and this is how it's intended, but it's just a shame that the Thirst for Blood is not giving an additional stack and is not working. Now, if you look a few turns later, here is when Lilia casts her skill, it shows you here, casting Burning Blood, loses 9,000 units, and then compound interest is triggered. So here it's pretty clear that the compound interest is triggering off of her skill. Now look at here, just the line right after, Thirst for Blood was triggered, and he lost 450 units. He even gained Scorch as an effect as well. So it's important you look at here. I'm looking here, hero skill damage dealt +5. That means I have 1 stack of compound interest. Now, if I go lower, obviously it will tell you that the damage dealt increased 10% due to Bertrand's compound interest. So this means that Lilia's second cast made this buff go higher. So the next turn we'll see 10%, which we do. It's right here, 10%. And it says basically right here at the beginning of the next turn that they're gaining 10% due to the compound interest. Now, one thing that is pretty interesting to realize is that when Bertrand did his first skill, which was, basically a few turns ago, basically we'll go back here and see. So in this instance, 009, which is at 9 seconds of the combat, he casts and we have nothing. The next turn, hero skill damage by 5. The next turn, hero skill damage by 5. Now, if you look here, for example, it will tell you that there is 3 seconds remaining right here. Now, when Lilia casts and then the next turn the buff comes back, it is at 4 seconds. So this is some quite interesting data because it tells you that when a new stack is applied, it seems to reset the stack of everything. Because if we look at the next few seconds, it stays at 10% for quite a while until it eventually disappears because it ran out of time. So you can see here at this turn, it disappeared just before Bertrand casts his own skill, which is a huge shame because he doesn't get to use his own buff whatsoever if he's the primary of his march. So this is really disappointing. Now, this would be obviously much better if, when we looked here, this compound interest was triggered by the Thirst for Blood. The Thirst for Blood just never triggers this ability, the skill from Bertrand, the buff that he gives, the stacks, it's not triggered by anything. Even here, you can see that Scorch is, applied as we saw here. And there's simply just no instance of basically this skill having any more stacks. It stays at 10%. So this is, a bit of a shame. You can see here Burning Blood, the Scorch, 1500 damage. Basically just, proving to us that nothing works but the main skill of Lilia. Now, to get an even better example, I did with Tia, because Tia obviously does not do any skill damage. She does provide a shield and a buff. And it's very evident when you look here that Bertrand, obviously he casts everything, Blue Blood, and then he gets Entitled Rage, everything happens, and then boom, he gets Thirst for Blood, and all of this stuff happens, but yet he is just having 1 stack of this apply, and it will take effect for 5 seconds. You look here, well, hero skill damage for 5, hero skill damage 5%. He has 1 stack, obviously. Now here is when Tia casted her rage skill, and you will see something quite interesting. So she is going to use Arbiter's Ward, and the shield effect happens, and then she gains Spiritual Rage, whatever, and then she gains a shield. So obviously there's a lot of stuff happening, but what's important to know is that the Thirst for Blood, which is Bertrand's talent, Thirst for Blood, was triggered. He lost 219 units, the Darkling, and Tia obviously is going to move on from there. She has nothing else. She casted the shield. She got the Thirst for Blood triggering from Bertrand's talent. She did 60 skill damage, which ended up being 219 damage of units lost to the Darkling. And there is just no compound interest. You can see at the bottom here, it's still here from the last Bertrand's turn. It has only 2 seconds remaining, which means there's been up for 3 seconds. And it's still at 5%. And then you look at the next turn, and the hero skill damage goes to 20%. That is obviously because Thea's own ability gives 15% skill damage to the March after she casts her shield. But you can see clearly that it is not the compound interest going up because it's still at 5%. So even though during Bertrand's turn, he casted a rage kill, got 5%. Tia's turn, she casted her rage kill and triggered the skill damage from the talent. It did not apply any buffs whatsoever. So this is really what is a shame about this talent, because this was something that the devs told us before would work and would trigger this in the first place. So in all eventuality, this really should be working, as it's clearly saying hero skill damage, and it's clearly Bertrand doing it, because it says even in the battle log for Tia that it's Bertrand's talent doing this skill damage. So this is very disappointing. Now, this is something that I have reported directly to them on the content creator Discord, and they are looking into it. They have answered me and asked for the reports and the proof, and we had a very long discussion as well as Mr. Sneaky, another YouTuber who's now in the FS family, has also contributed to this discussion, and we talked back and forth about it. And we have decided, obviously, that this is a bug. It's not working as intended, because if so, they had to reward everything, because the wording of everything is wrong, as right now it obviously is not correct, and it is making a lot of people think mistakenly about things that are not happening. Now, if we had this working, this would make Bertrand excessively better, because obviously he would be getting his 3 stacks much easier. Now, in a combat where obviously he is with Tia, for example, well, he would be casting his skill, the talent would trigger. He would get 2 stacks, then Tia would cast her skill, the talent would trigger, he'd get 1 stack, and then the 1 stack would refresh the duration, meaning that by the time it's his turn again, there is a good chance that he would have all of these stacks on him and would be able to consume them all for extra 5% damage per stack, which would make this hero excessively great with Tia, but also with any kind of hero, because they would be getting its stacks all the time. And kind of like what I said earlier, this is the report with Tia again. You can see that the first skill would be cast here, and then a few turns later is the second casted rage skill, which would refresh the duration. And then off skill, it doesn't happen often, but there is, you know, the skill with the buff would happen on this turn, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds, there is a really good chance that you would be able to get this duration long enough so that the Bertrand could consume his skill, he could get the full buff of damage, because the deputy obviously cast their skills a few seconds later than the primary hero, which means that between the deputy and then the primary recasting again, there would be a possibility that the gap of seconds is about 5 seconds, because often in this game I find that rage kill cast in about 7 to 10 seconds, and the higher level you are with more and more talents that give you rage generation, there is a better chance that you are going to cast rage kills faster. Also, when you're attacking enemies, when you're doing damage, when you are also getting attacked personally by normal attack, you do gain rage from many different sources in this game. So there's a few ways that this could happen and be kind of like shorter. Obviously, it doesn't happen often, but there is a few instances, like here, for example, you can see that, you know, there's exactly 5 seconds between the deputy and Bertrand's skill again. So this would be, you know, a very, very good bonus to make Bertrand have his kit work properly all the time. As well as, of course, as many of you know, the only real way of currently getting the max stack on Bertrand is using Tohar, because Tohar's damage is done over multiple seconds, which means by the time it's Bertrand's turn again, the buff hasn't gone away, and this itself gives 5 stacks of the buff. It only goes to 3, but obviously they would give up to 5 stacks, so it fully stacks it up. So this is just one way to do it, and really the only way to do it. But as you can see, a lot of bugs going on with Bertrand here, and just the simple fix that made the talent work would fix him pretty much entirely. I do also feel kind of ashamed that this hero is flying, because the only way to get this hero to get his full potential, which is really good, but currently the way he is losing in 1v1 versus Lilia, but he has no AoE damage, which means that he's kind of like lacking. Obviously 1v1s don't really become relevant because of this talent, as I said in my previous video, but still he should be really very strong 1v1er, being that he is not an AoEer like the other mages. But he is flying, but the only hero that makes his kit work is Tohar, who is not flying. So he's obviously meant to go with Tohar because they're new heroes together, but he's also not been made flying just for fun. He's obviously also meant to go with Tia, and even sometimes Aetius if you prefer move speed and being squishy. But really, it's kind of like a shame to have a flying hero put in the game and then you can't use him flying, because otherwise he is very gimp. Now, I still believe Bertrand and Tia are going to be amazing, and I am still going to max Bertrand, and I still recommend you do as well if you have the Celestials, if you're playing the human race in the game. If you're not, I recommend him a lot less. Of course, unless you go full on Tohar, which still be decent. But as you know from my previous video, Tohar has many bugs himself, and has many things that are not working properly at all for him to be viable in the game the way the game is currently. And this is what I'm going to talk about next. But just before I go on to Tohar, the last bug I want to show about Bertrand, which is very simple. You can see here, increased damage dealt by 5% per stack, consumes all stacks. So on his rage skill of Bertrand, he consumes all the stacks of Golden Mark and increases the damage by basically up to 15% if he had the max amount of stacks. Now this is working. This does happen. And when you look at a combat log, it will happen. He will make the buff disappear, do his skill damage, and then the next turn he gets the buff again because the skill damage triggered the buff, but it is not shown anywhere in the battle log. So we just went through a lot of battle logs. I'm not going to go again because I would be wasting your time. you will not find this anywhere. Look as much as you want. You will never see an instance where Bertrand is consuming his stacks and it's not showing you the damage that it gives. It's just doing it. So we don't even know if actually it's working or not because it's really hard to test. But it is another bug. It's not shown at all. We can't see it, which is making a lot of people believe wrongly that some of this is not working the way it is. Because if you put Bertrand as secondary, what's going to happen is your primary, let's say Lilia, casts the skill, gets the trigger for compound interest. Then Bertrand casts the skill, and then it gets the trigger for compound interest. But then you look at the next turn, you're like, oh, I'm expecting to see 2 stacks, 10%, and you only see 1 stack. That's because he consumed the stack that Lilia gave, and then casted his own skill, and then gave his own stack afterwards of compound interest. So it's a lot of uncertainty, unclarity, and bug like visually. So we really need something to be done. And obviously, I do expect the devs to eventually address it because these are things that are not working as intended. It's not them intending for it to be not clear. And we are really following up with them and working with them. Of course, it's a period right now where a lot of them are on vacation because of the events that are going on right now, which is the Lunar Chinese New Year event, which is obviously something that happens in real life as well. So obviously, this is something that might take a few weeks to get resolved, but just know that it is something that we are following up on actively. Now, Tohar. There is a lot wrong with this hero, and obviously I'm not going to repeat everything that I said in my previous video where I show exactly why he's not working at all. The very short version is that this only applies if he fully channels his rage skill. So his awakening only works when he is finishes channeling Rage of the Plateau. So Rage of the Plateau takes 5 seconds to fully channel. This only works if he fully channels it. Now, any movement during these 5 seconds interrupts it and cancels the awakening from channeling, from activating at all, which means that if you move at all in the 5 seconds where he's channeling, you lose the awakening skill completely and you have to wait another 10 seconds before you have a chance of gaining it because he has to do 5 normal attacks and then 5 seconds of channeling. So it's about 10 seconds, sometimes a little bit less, but in any case, you really just don't get this awakening skill to work at all most of the time, because if you've ever played War in Call of Dragons, you do not go 10 seconds without moving very often in a ball fight. If you ever get targeted or if you ever target people, they usually back off and make you move, or you should be moving, otherwise you'll just be dead. So there is really a lot of issues with this, as well as Plateau Protection. His 4th skill also only works when he's channeling. So if you're not channeling or if you're interrupting your channeling, well, this buff goes away too. So you do kind of like have 3 of his ability that are based on him not moving in a game where movement happens every 2 seconds. So there is a lot of issues here. The only real good thing about Tohar is his 30% skill damage dealt, which is obviously massive and still makes him usable with Bertrand because the fact that he is the only one who activates his kit properly. But there is one incredibly simple fix that would make Tohar completely different and make him much more viable so easily in this game, and that is going to be if it worked the same as Infernal Flame, the artifact. Obviously this is a little bit different, but for those of you who've played War with this artifact before, you know that once you cast it, even if the enemy kind of like starts moving away, it does seem to kind of trigger even from a further range. So basically this is not a very different mechanic. If only the balls around Tohar were able to simply keep casting even as the enemy is moving away, even if you are kind of like chasing them and stuff or moving, any movement interrupts Earth Conduit, and it's just really not great. It's just not what you would like to see. And if they made it so that these 5 balls, and once they're activated, they kind of just go for it and don't cancel as soon as you move 1 inch, it would make this hero completely different, much more viable. It would really fix everything about him, in my opinion, because then no matter what, once you get this, the awaken triggers, and then no matter what, this plateau protection stays on you as you are doing it. Even if the channeling had like a little extra range, let's say an extra, 1 or 2 seconds of movement range, meaning that once you start channeling, they can move a little bit and he still gets channeling, and if they move way too far, then the channeling stops. That would be, something better. So we're just gonna hope that one day, after a lot of people kind of like complain and tell them they don't like it, or after basically no one unlocks him and maxes him except a few whales, they might want to change him up, because as of right now, I just cannot recommend for the majority of players to even use Tohar at all. The only reason that he's currently has any use in the game is to go with Bertrand, and it is good, but I really also like to fly Bertrand, as he is going to be very, very good as a flying Mage, especially if they fix all the bugs on him. So this is kind of an overview of what's currently going on, the status of these heroes. Tohar is obviously still has potential and should still be good, but he needs just a very, very simple tweak for it to be working. And Bertrand just needs a lot of rewarding and making some of the bugs kind of like work on him so that it's not bugged and that we can enjoy him to the potential that he really has, as especially a flying march to Tia or as a good ground march with Tohar. Now, the one thing to argue about here is that if you buffed Bertrand in making the bugs not bugged, he doesn't really need Tohar anymore. But if you make Tohar's skill also kind of better, the way I said, he does become a much stronger hero that provides 30% damage, 35% attack, and a lot of defense while channeling. So it becomes a completely different game where you can now mix Tohar with other heroes, such as Lilia, for example, and Bertrand can go with Tia. Bertrand is amazing also with Velin as secondary, and also with Aetius and Lilia, and it works with basically anyone, but you know, these are the options. There's a lot of stuff you could do, such as, you know, Lilia Tohar and Bertrand Velin, or Bertrand Tia, Lilia Velin, and then you could even have another third march because Tohar would be decent again. So you could even skip Velin and have Waldir Velin, and then have Bertrand with Tohar, and then Lilia with Tia, or vice versa. So there's so many things you could do. You could have 3 very decent mage marches, and it's kind of what people expected from the Season G2 mages. So let's hope that they do implement some of these bug fixes and hopefully changes to Tohar. And feel free to go on the Discord and voice your opinion in a respectful manner, of course, and say that, you know, you find Tohar underwhelming or that you can't see yourself going for him because his skill is always interrupted because the way the game works. And just make sure to share your experience, whatever is your honest opinion. If you like him, you also can do that. There's no problem with that. And if you have any other things you've noticed about this hero that's not working, feel free to share in the comments below. I would gladly take a look at anything you guys share. So thank you guys for watching, and hopefully when I see you on a next video, it is to announce to you that they have fixed some of these issues.